Man has risen, not fallen. He can choose to develop his capacities as the highest animal and to try to rise still farther, or he can choose otherwise. The choice is his responsibility and his alone. There is no automatism that will carry him upward without choice or effort, and there is no trend solely in the right direction. Evolution has no purpose. Man must supply this for himself. The means to gaining right ends involve both organic evolution and human evolution, but human choice as to what are the right ends must be based on human evolution. George Gaylord Simpson. Welcome to the Lost Traveler Podcast. I am your ever-loving host, Henry Cameron Allen, and I'm here today with a special co-host that we are meeting for the first time. His name is Babs Fascison, and he's an applauded author and a life coach and a general helper in the world, is what I gather from reading a little bit about your biography. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for having me. I'm pretty honored to be here. And thank you for the great work you're doing on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for your great work. Now, you're based in New York, is that right?
Yeah.
But you're not from there.
No, not originally.
No? I can tell by your accent.
Exactly. I figured my accent will give me away in the first second.
No, but I tell you, I have a lot of friends from different parts of the world, and your eloquence is something that struck me. The first time I heard your voice, I was like, this is a man who is a communicator.
That's a very kind thing to say, and I totally appreciate it. The beauty of this convergence that's going on globally is we can now access information, resources across different regions and across different parts of the world. It just makes the world a smaller village. And like you said, you have friends across, different geographical locations, people from different ethnic background, I believe, maybe from different economic background and educational background. And so life just becomes a lot more beautiful when we all are able to interact in this beautiful way like we're doing today.
When did you discover that for yourself? Like that,
Frank?
I mean, I'm sure that growing up in a certain environment, you can only see as far as the horizon, but we can dream much farther than that. When did your dreams begin and your journey to become a global citizen, as it were?
Honestly, it started way back when I was, I wouldn't say 12. Mm-hmm. You see, one day I ran into the room and saw my mom crying, and I asked her why she was crying. At the time, she had received the bad news from her mom, but the reason she was crying was more so because she was not in a position to help her mom at the time. Mm-hmm. Although I was pretty young, that hurt. It broke my heart, and I made a determination that day that I would do everything within my power to ensure that I build a life that allows me to provide help to everyone I care about and everyone I love. So that was really where that first, inkling about what else could life bring to me. Could there be something beyond my immediate experience? This was the time I started thinking about this. Now, my mom is a librarian. I talk a lot about my mom because my both parents have significant impact in my life and my siblings. My mom's a librarian, and so she ensured that we loved books so much. So we read a lot of books, maybe to an extreme where she didn't think kids needed toys. She just thought kids needed books.
Well, kids can pick up a stick or a stone and turn it into a toy magically.
Well,
So.
that's right. I know, right? When birthdays came around, she would tell our aunts, her sisters, "Hey, if you're getting them any gift, it has to be in the form of a book." You know, so I found this love for reading pretty early, and so when I began to ask questions like, could there be something else beyond the experiences that surrounds my upbringing? Is there more to life than what I'm currently experiencing? And how do I access that beyond anything else that's beyond where I'm at today? So I began to read a lot of books, inspirational books, books that speaks to mindset. And I realized that the one way I could shift the fortune or change the trajectory of my life was essentially to shift my mindset.
Mm.
And so I began this journey of understanding what exactly makes up the growth mindset. What is the growth mindset about? How do I cause a shift in my life through changing my mindset? And that was where this whole journey started. So while I was in college, most of the kids were partying around. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time buying books. I remember when I was living college, other students were thinking about how to move their electronics, how to move their, clothing home. I was thinking about how to move these 3 suitcases of books that I had bought. That was, and so I read a lot in college, again, about inspiration and how I could, figure out a path for myself. So I had always known that a time would come in my life where I would need to move physically from, my geographical location for maybe a better life or for something better than my immediate experience. So yeah, that it started pretty early for me.
Wow. Well, as a world traveler, a fellow world traveler, I understand the literal and figurative burden of carrying books with you. I do, and it keeps me buff, but and you're pretty buff too. But it's all because of the books.
Yeah.
But were you always interested in history? I mean, did you explore the history of your parents?
Yeah, I
Was your
mean,
was your father Liberian as well?
no, my father is a political scientist.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so my father's a political scientist. My mom is a library scientist. So interesting
Oh,
combination.
librarian. I thought you said
Yeah.
like she was from Liberia. I was like, oh,
Oh
that's really
no,
a fascinating
she's
history, Liberia.
she's a
No, she's a librarian.
librarian.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's library science and political science
Wow, wow.
combination. And yeah, I think around the dinner table, especially Saturdays, my dad made it a very important point to teach us something new
Mhm.
about our past, something new about our history, where we're coming from. And he uses those, moments to share. So I was very interested in my roots. I was very interested in my, ancestry. I wanted to understand my lineage, not only because I studied clinical biochemistry in college and I understand that there are medical implications, but then
Right.
I also just wanted to understand if there have been heroes in my lineage, if there have been
Yes.
people who broke, the barriers in my lineage. Is it genetically within me to break barriers? I just
Wow.
wanted to understand that, even though as of today I realize that the ability to break you know barriers is not entirely genetic. It's a
Right.
product of nature and nurture, and so pulling
Yeah.
both together, you could almost do anything. We could alter the course of our lives, just by nature and nurture. So yeah, I've always been interested in knowing more about my background, my history, and all that.
Yeah, I have as well. I've had my DNA tested, and I've also been doing a lot of genealogical research. And I've actually been studying a little bit about epigenetics, the science of epigenetics, which
Yeah.
is showing that we do carry ancestral memory in
That's
our
right.
genetic makeup. And in that sense, it goes deeper than nature or nurture, don't you think? I mean,
That's
it's
right.
to be able to recall within yourself and reflect on your emotions and your talents, all those things you love about yourself, all those
Yep.
things that you want to improve about or improve upon.
Yep.
You know, we all stand on the shoulders of giants and
That's
of
right.
survivors.
In your research and in your studies, have you found something uniquely significant to you personally?
I have the oldest ancestor that I can name was the founding king of Finland and Norway.
Uh,
And he was known as the ancient giant king of
mm,
Kvaneland. He was physically a large, tall man.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I actually have a tattoo on my forearm, which is his symbol. I was able to find it's called Valknut.
Wow,
It's three
wow.
interlocking triangles, and it means the heart of a giant. And so that was really moving to me and empowering. I mean, obviously, the farther back you go, the more you realize, well, that just because I'm related to this person doesn't make me necessarily special. There are thousands, maybe millions of people related to that person. But to be able to go back through the names of my family, of individuals, from my mother to her father to his father, all the way back in time, and it's like going down a ladder into a deep cave,
Mm,
right? You have to step on every rung of the ladder in order to reach your destination.
mm,
And the deeper I go, the deeper I want to go, the more
mm,
fascinated and wondrous that cavern becomes. I did some deep diving and I was actually able to discover my roots in East Africa, you know, which is the cradle of humanity. You know,
mm,
as far as we know, that's where humanity sprung from. Um,
mm,
and I can name a number of tribes that are in my blood from Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, that whole, you know, area. And
yeah.
um, and that also impacted me very deeply because my grandmother used to say, I have a patch of melanin on my elbow, a birthmark, they call it.
Okay.
And she used to point at that. She'd say, you know, that's what's left of your Africa because we're all from Africa, honey. And I said, yeah, you know, that was from childhood. I had this fascination. And then when I was able to name the people that I came from, or that were the you know, launching pad of my existence, um, I've started studying African history and finding out a lot of things that have been suppressed. You know, in the West, we learn about European history mostly. We learn about the ancient Greeks and Romans, but we're not taught who inspired them. You know, we're taught about
True.
the Dark Ages in Europe, but that was the Golden Age in Africa. So
That's
I'm
right.
I'm really fascinated by that and how that has affected your journey. You know, the more you've been able to deep dive, because I know that in America, in North America, it's very difficult for people who are descended from enslaved people, for instance, that were brought from Africa against their will, to find out their roots, to discover where they come from, who they come from. Families were divided, which is one of the great tragedies, I think, in American history and world history, really. How does that impact you in terms of your understanding of your own lineage, as you say?
It's interesting that um the way we started this conversation with me saying the world is a global village.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see that we're coming back to that point now, which is the fact that Um, Although we might perceive that we are uniquely different, we are actually very, very similar in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And if we understand clearly that whilst we are different, we're equally similar, I think the world would probably be a better place. And understanding our roots and, just doing a deep dive into our history and really just trying to know where we came from and how that might inspire our life further is an exercise I believe everyone should invest in. It's definitely not only for our sake, but then maybe for the generation yet unborn. We probably want to be able to transfer something meaningful to the next generation. So if anybody says, why are you investigating? Why are you digging? Why are you diving into this? One of the responses could be so I could pass something on to my kids and the next generation. So yeah, for me personally, I guess digging into my history, and I'm very grateful for the parents that I have who had the opportunity of sharing a lot with me and exposing me to some of these information. I think it has propelled me through the course of my life to first believe that whilst we are different, we're actually similar. To understand also that every human deserves respect and every human deserves dignity. To understand that regardless of what I'm being told, what I hear, what I see, I alone can determine what my limits are. So when I think about everything that I've learned so far from my history, it's the history of people who broke barriers, a history of people who, broke the chains and freed themselves. It's a history of people who took impossible life experiences and turned them into something magnificent. I think it would probably be the fourth generation backwards, which would be my great great grandfather who was captured during the war, and he created for himself an underground path to escape in a different community. And he spent several, I think, 2.5 years building this underground path. So, and with no tools,
Wow.
nothing, bare hands. With his very bare hands, no tools, he dug a path under the ground and he came out in a different community. I think today, when I'm faced with, similarly impossible situations, I think about him. I think about other people who, had more difficult, experiences, and how they were tenacious, they were very resilient, and they made it through it. So that's one of my biggest inspiration today.
Creative too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's this podcast centers on global universal life skills, things that every single person, 8 billion now on the planet, these
Can
are
you
all the
believe it?
skill. I can believe it. And I think there's so much to be done with that too, that we have. When you look at over human history 10,000 years ago, we weren't even close to a billion, I don't think,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
spread out pretty widely over thousands and thousands of years, maybe even over 1 million years.
Hmm.
And yet, from the beginning, we have all learned in one measure or another the same essential life skills, things like communication, things like financial literacy. If you have 3 eggs and I have a handful of rice and we make a trade, that's currency, right? That's
That's right.
currency exchange. Or whether you're trading stocks on Wall Street, it's the same gesture.
Yep.
It's just where is it culturally? Where is it in your proficiency? We have emotional literacy, we have sexual literacy, we have hygiene, grief, um, creativity. These are all essential human qualities and skills that we learn. And I don't know about culturally your origins, how life skills are taught. I know in my background, and I grew up all over the world. My dad was a cultural diplomat for the US government. And what I've seen globally since, especially now that we have the capacity to look in windows into worlds that we may not be familiar with, is that there's also kind of a universal projection that parents are the ones to teach those skills. Most parents, not all, but most, are deficient in the very skills that they are charged with teaching. These skills are not taught in schools formally, right? And so I talk to a lot of young people. I say, where do you learn your life skills? And I list, and they say, I go to YouTube, or I look around the world, around me, my society. That's where I learn how to be and how not to be. Your generous sponsorship and individual support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a charitable project under the fiscal sponsorship of United Charitable, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The Lost Travelers Club focuses primarily on the needs of parents who have outlived their beloved children. We recently launched our new Brain Candy Project wing, providing art supplies to children still struggling with critical or terminal health-related conditions. We hope to raise enough funds to launch Brain Candy, an arts and literature magazine created by and for these young people. Find out more at www.braincandy.online. Thank you. Balance, pain mitigation, range of motion, athletic performance, focus, memory, immune system support, and REM level of sleep. All this and more made possible affordably with no pharmaceuticals, no injections, or invasive treatments. Just socks, insoles, and patches made stronger with the tactile patterning of Vox Life products. Scientifically proven to work and guaranteed. Now in the USA, Canada, and the UK. Visit www.dianedinkmeyer.voxlife.com. That's Vox, VOXX, life. You'll be glad you did. Where did you learn your life skills? You said your parents were very influential in your upbringing and perspective.
So sometimes I like to say the school of hard knocks. And life itself has a way of, teaching us lessons. I guess our receptivity to the lessons that life might teach us would help us determine if we learn or not. Firstly, I believe that being born into the family that I was, born into is an opportunity. I'm very grateful for two parents who were very intentional about, changing the trajectory of their family by raising kids in a certain way that they probably didn't get the opportunity of being raised that way. So both parents, and it's very important when two people come together to raise kids, to be on the same page on how they would like to raise these kids. If their values are very different, chances are that might impact the kids negatively. But when parents are on the same page on how they want, their kids to turn out, and they probably invest in learning the skills that it's required to help raise those kids in the in the way that they want the kids to turn out, that can be very helpful. So yes, my parents started the whole process. I guess one of the biggest things I owe to my mom is always to say thank you for exposing me to books. Books. I was a very introverted kid, very quiet. I was. I didn't. Firstly, I did not speak early, so I had delayed speech problems, and so most of my life I have been alone with my thoughts. Uh, Very often, people describe me as quiet, as calm. Sometimes people might wonder if I am upset or angry, but I really am not. I'm just a generally quiet person, and I sit with my thought a lot. But the only one way that I get my thoughts out is by writing. So I would write a lot of notes. I would write to inanimate objects. I would write to strangers. I would write notes to just about anything. That's the way I communicate, and that's the way I get the thoughts in my head out. So as I continued to grow and read books, that opened my mind and exposed me a lot. And now when it comes to critical life skills, I believe that building on the foundation that my parents started, books, and actually proactively going after those skills has been very helpful for me. So there are two things. Life's challenges are not pre-announced. They just happen. And so we sometimes just find ourselves in really difficult life situations, and we need to decide if we would swim or sink. And so when we come to that point, we need to make a decision. But I usually advise, people that I know not to wait until life's challenges hit us hard, but maybe start preparing for possible life's challenges. So through reading, through practice, I was able to prepare myself for some of the skills that I require. So very early on, my father would say, one of the biggest skills you need to survive on earth is your ability to communicate, your ability to effectively communicate a point. So I'll tell you how my parents decided to train us in this way. So every Saturday, my father sets up a debate in the living room. He gives us a topic on Monday morning and tells us, hey, this Saturday, we're going to be talking about maybe Western politics. And so I and my brothers will go and read a lot about Western politics, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday through Saturday. So Saturday morning after the chores, we come into the living room like a court. And my father's the judge. And so we do a debate. So I go my first point, my brother says his, and then we just argue out that case. And my father makes a determination of who wins the case, and then he guides us. So through that experience, every Saturday since I believe I was maybe 8, that helped me a lot. First, to articulate my points, to be critical in my thinking, and to be able to verbalize my thoughts. So that's the one way he taught us how to effectively communicate. And I think that's probably one of the biggest skills that has been very helpful in my journey across the world.
That was the first thing I noticed about you, is what a great communicator you are. So well done.
You mentioned that. Thank you.
Where did your dad get that? Where did he learn his life skill? Is he still with us?
Yes, he is. Mom's passed on.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Say that again. Your dad?
Yeah, no. I'm glad to hear that he's still with us. Sorry to hear about your mom. Yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I lost my father last October, a year ago. So.
Oh yeah, about the same time mom passed. Oh, I'm sorry about your dad. Yeah, I mean, I think my dad was just very intentional also about his life and the way that he wants to raise kids. I believe that his background was not exactly the greatest, and he wanted to change that. So in order to change that, he knew he had to do something totally different from what he received as a child. So I think that's where that whole thing started. And then when he met the woman that he finally married, which is my mom, she came from she had the same point of view, she had the same values, she had the same desire, which is there a way for us to break this circle that we currently are in? And the way to do this is probably to raise the next generation differently, from the way that we were raised.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
I have a cousin who's an indigenous tribal leader in North America, and he talks a lot about the 7 grandfather teachings. And one of the tenets of these teachings is that everything that you speak, everything that you do, and everything that you think, you must be holding the next 7 generations in your mind.
Wow.
Because
isn't that powerful?
So powerful. So do you have kids?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. I did think extensively about the idea of the next generation. And I think it's probably one of the inspirations for my book, Cracking the Life Code. Because after actively learning, growing, and investing in personal development, I figured 20 years of lessons of building and growth is sufficient for me to maybe share some of the lessons that I've learned. I like to say that life does not come with a manual, and so it's imperative that we crack the life code sooner than later in life. And when we successfully crack the life code, our responsibility is to transfer this life code, which you could call life skills, to the next generation. And so primarily when I was writing my book, Cracking the Life Code, I was thinking about generations yet unborn who might not have the privilege of the kinds of parents that I had, and might be looking to navigate life and the different areas of life and wondering, is there a manual? Is there a way? The same way I was thinking when I was 12, might just tumble on this book and find some nuggets in it. And I hope that it would be, helpful.
Well, I'll definitely be putting a link to your book in the description of the podcast. One of the things that I've found in my journey as a life skills mentor and educator is that it's going to be different for everybody. Even though the skills themselves are universal, everyone has proficiency in some and deficiencies in others. And when I share my tools that I've gleaned over the last 30, 40 years, I do it understanding that nobody can use these tools the way I use them, because my journey is unique to me, right? And so I can do is I can open my toolkit out on the table, as it were, and then I can take some of these new tools and see if I can synthesize them with the tools I already possess to create unique tools for my life, right? Just as future generations, as you say, will take the tools that I've synthesized and then synthesize them with their tools that they already carry, right? To create unique tools for them. For years, I've turned on the television and the internet and have felt bombarded with messages of support, begging for money to support children in Africa, Afghanistan, India, all over the world, war-torn countries. Children are starving, not only for food, but for education and love in some cases. I recently connected with Desire childcare organization that transforms the lives of orphans and vulnerable Ugandan children in Kampala and Mukono by providing wholesome food, housing, healthcare, and creative arts education from early childhood to adulthood. Won't you join me in helping save orphans and vulnerable children? We can do it together, one organization at a time. I chose this one. Visit desirechildcare.org for more information. Thank you. How have you been able to navigate and sort out what is yours versus what is, maybe useful for others?
Well, frankly, I believe that, like you rightly said, our individual experiences are unique, and that's where the idea of self-help becomes tricky.
Yeah.
So when we listen to speakers, inspirational speakers, motivational speakers, it's it's important to note that these individuals might be very articulate and they might be sharing practical principles, but those principles are probably unique to them. Whilst these principles may have worked for them, they probably might not be as effective for some other people who might be in a different situation.
Right.
So maybe sometimes what is needed is a mixture of multiple different skills to arrive at what is unique or what is best for our solution or for our present condition or situation. For me, I have learned over time what works best for me through try and error, through multiple practice, through life experiences. So to some extent, and I'm still working on it, I'm still growing, still learning, but to a large extent, I understand what works for me. What's very interesting is I come from a family of three boys, and each one totally different.
Right.
I'm completely different from my middle brother, very different from my last brother. And my two brothers, they're very different in their personalities, in their, perception. And now our values might be similar because we were raised in the same home by the same
Right.
parents. But then our personalities, maybe our desires and our goals are very different. And so even in discussing some of my tools and my strategies with my brothers, I have found that some of them don't really work for them.
Yeah.
But what I've advised for them to do is take these tools. Maybe they might be a starting point for you, maybe to get you thinking or just get you exploring. But make sure that what you're picking from my tool is only the part that's useful to you. And now you can build on that and create, like you said earlier, a unique tool that works for you. And now maybe your son will pick that tomorrow, and then based on his current experience, might build on that tool. And so this tool continues to evolve as human nature continues to evolve. So this is primarily how I have seen it so far. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm 56 now, and I feel like the skills that I've needed at different stages of life have been different. And the skills that I am learning now for the autumn and winter of my life, um, nobody talked about how to age gracefully, how to use the wisdom of life experience, how to deal with the breaking down of your body and systems. Even if you're healthy, I'm healthier than I've been in my entire life. And yet I have limitations now that I didn't have even 10 years ago. Right. And so I think it's really important to talk about these things. This is why I started the podcast. And the first guest was my father.
Wow.
Right. Because I wanted to ask him some of these questions about aging, about spirituality, about, his journey and his perspective. Someday I'll have my mom on the cat. She's still with us. She's 78, and she just started a new career.
Wow.
That's taking
Isn't that
her. I mean, she just got
amazing?
back from Istanbul, I mean, she's an amazing person. One of the things that you were talking about that, take the things that work for you and leave the rest. My mother has always had this great expression: eat the fish and spit out the bones.
That's right.
Right? Take
That's
what
right.
nourishes you, take what doesn't stick in your throat. And use it to good effect. Use it to improve yourself. And that's that's only on your terms as an
Yeah.
individual. You are the only one who can decide for yourself what is good, what is right, what is true, what is beautiful.
Mm.
Um, you know, and it's very difficult in this media driven age
Yeah.
because
That's
everyone's
right.
looking outside of themselves for how to be in the world, as if we were little children, because children do that. We observe the world around us. We look to our parents and the adults around us, our teachers, and
Yeah.
even our older siblings, right? And we learn from them how to be or how not to be. And we still do that. And I think we all have, I mean, we talk about sometimes in these circles, the inner child
Mm.
that didn't necessarily get what it needed in its
Mm.
youth, but that little child is still within us, and we get the amazing gift of
Mm.
being able to parent ourselves, to be able to parent our inner child, to reassure that inner child, you're okay just the way you are. I love
Mm.
you unconditionally, right?
Mm.
But
Yep.
one thing that isn't talked about really at all is the inner adult that lives inside children. It's that inner adult that was in your head, Babs, when you were talking about being an introspective, quiet, sensitive child, right? And people were wondering what was going on, right? That's emotional literacy. That's part of the emotional literacy. How did you navigate that, and where does that live in you now? I don't know how old you are, but you know where you are in your adulthood.
Well, I will be 40 in a couple of weeks. So
Happy
that's
birthday.
interesting. Thank you.
Good
I'm
girl.
looking forward to stepping up to the fourth floor. Yeah, but as I'm still that person. I'm still very quiet and introspective. Um, and I think it has helped me a lot. It has helped me to manage the way I communicate with people. It has helped me with empathy. It has helped me to harness my EQ, if you will,
Yeah.
my emotional intelligence, because I'm not, although the general assumption in society is the fastest speaker is the smartest guy.
Right.
But what I've found over time is the first person to speak isn't exactly the smartest person. And so I take a lot of time to think about what I'm about to say. I take a lot of time to think about how that might impact the person listening to me, and if that will help them grow or if that would tear them apart. So in the moments where I'm reflecting and I'm thinking, it's really me asking myself really critical questions about how the words I'm about to say might come out, how it might impact the person listening. And in my introspection, what I've found is it helps to ground me. It helps to keep me seeking depth versus superficial. It
Yeah.
helps me to go deeper than the average individual. In my so many hours and times of thinking and introspection, I learn a lot about myself. Like you said earlier, a lot of us just look to the world around us for solutions to our problems, not realizing that we really should be looking internally first, and asking ourselves critical questions. While a lot of people spend more time on everything else but themselves, I believe that the sharper, more emotionally intelligent people spend some time with themselves. They learn themselves as they grow, because we evolve. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago.
That's right.
And I'm constantly learning myself as I evolve and as I grow. My desires are changing, my goals are changing, my interests are changing. And so I'm constantly learning myself and spending time with myself. I like to encourage people spend time with themselves, thinking, reflecting, and just learning themselves. It has helped me a whole lot.
Shadow and Light LLC was established by Dave Roberts and Reverend Patty Farino, co-authors of When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Their mission is to empower individuals to transcend life challenges by integrating spiritual practices with psychology to achieve peace. They are available for individualized spiritual counseling, virtual or in-person presentations and workshops to universities, organizations, and other interested groups, virtual or in-person book club meetings. For further information, go to psychologyprofessorandminister.com. Don't you think that it's interesting that in our time, and those of us that are sort of on a similar frequency of not only self-discovery, but educating and mentoring others, that COVID manifested, that sort of forced humanity to spend time introspectively. It was like Mother Nature said, okay, kids, I've had it. I've had it with your noise. I've had it with your, toys everywhere and messing up my environment. Go to your room and think about what you're doing. Right. Think about your actions, right? It forced us into a degree of isolation. And I think that has had a tremendous impact on the human experience at all levels.
Yep.
And do you think that impact is going to have, or is already having, positive ramifications? Or do you think that, we're definitely seeing an increase in depression and anxiety and rage and all these other emotions that are, have been sublimated for so long, and we don't know how to deal with this, which is why I think epigenetics is very interesting right now, because, our ancestors have been through viral pandemics before in human history, more than once. And so there's something in it. And when you were talking about your great grandfather, right? It's such a powerful and beautiful metaphor, Babs, that I'm going to carry with me that image now of your grandfather freeing himself with the tools that he had, his hands.
Yep.
We all have the tools. We have all the tools we need. Really.
That's true. It's not what we don't have that limits us. It's what we have, but don't realize it.
Don't realize. Exactly right.
Yeah. Very often we focus on the things that we don't have, but if we took some time to just take inventory of what we have already, it's enough to help us at least get the journey started.
Yeah. And
talking about COVID and the different ramifications and the impact, what I've seen is, especially from the corporate world, what I've seen is there's been a lot of interest in, reevaluating our priorities. And so a lot of people since COVID have said, wait a minute, I can lose my job in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And I've invested 20 years of my life, 30 years of my life in this one career. And in the blink of an eye, that career can be gone. Yeah. And so question is, how important are the things that we focus on? And so I'm beginning to see that a lot of people are beginning to prioritize the things that matter. I had a client once call me on his 70th birthday, and he told me, it's my saddest day. Like, wow, you're turning 70 and I'm getting ready to send you a card, and I'm really excited for you. Why are you saying this morning? And he went, well, I was raised in poverty, and I decided I would never go back to poverty. For this reason, I invested a lot of my time trying to build wealth. So for 40 years, I was just working really hard to build wealth, just to ensure that I do not return to poverty. I have amassed a lot of wealth. I built companies and all that. But what I did not do in the process was people. I did not focus on relationships.
Right.
I didn't build people. I didn't foster stronger relationships. So today I'm 70, but I don't exactly know if the people around me today are really for the right reasons. I don't even know if I have a strong connection to them.
Yeah.
And that was really sad. It was sad because, like many people, we often focus on what money can buy when we really should be focusing on what money cannot buy.
Mm.
If money can buy it, it's great. But our time should be committed to the things that money cannot buy: health and wellness, family, mental health, and the things that actually, when we lose, we cannot regain. I think that's the awakening that I experienced with COVID. So a lot of people went, whoa, I could lose this job just like that. Maybe it's time to focus on my family. And now we're seeing a lot of conversation about the return to office, and many people saying, I don't want to return to office. I would rather change my job than go back to the office, because I've had time to share moments with my daughter, with my son, my wife, or my spouse, whatever. And
Right.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And don't take me back to that world of corporate slavery. This is what I'm saying now.
A guy wire is a tensioned cable that is designed to enhance the stability of a freestanding structure. Think of me as your guy wire. In terms of life skills mentoring, you're perfectly capable of standing stably on your own 2 feet. But I'm a cable that can enhance your stability. I'm available for individual or couples counseling, life skills mentorship, child loss grief support, LGBTQ plus support. I can also officiate weddings, end-of-life ceremonies, baby namings, invocations, or whatever guidance you may need. I serve all genders, all ages. Sessions are affordable, discreet, private, and conducted online. Find me at guy-wire.org. Book your appointment today. You know, there are more enslaved people on the planet today than there ever have been combined in human history.
I believe it.
We all need, it's true, it's a fact. When we consider debt, when we consider trafficking, when we consider people who are stuck in an endless, job, the whole educational system in the West was designed to get children out of nature, off of farms, and into factories. It was designed to dehumanize us. And that it becomes part of our habit body. And there's a lot that we need to unlearn. And I think what I'm experiencing is the beginning, perhaps, of unlearning some of those systems that have dehumanized us. All the things that we are seeing on the news, on the internet every single day, wars and greed and all these negative things, those are not human nature. Human nature is compassion and love and community and family and working together to build, a safe and wonderful, fun, creative life here on this earth. And that's why I'm here. I know that's my purpose, is to be a helper, to foster human nature in that sense. As we wrap up, I can't believe it's already been almost an hour.
I know, right?
You know,
I know.
this is why I love this thing, because I meet these incredible people like yourself. I feel like after this brief conversation, we've been friends for years.
I
You
know.
know,
I know.
and I hope we'll come back together and do it again. We'll
Absolutely.
have a part two. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Absolutely.
And thank you for co-hosting this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I always ask that we end with three reflections, three practical tools from your kit that anyone, anywhere in the world, any socioeconomic status, any culture can walk away from this conversation and maybe play with a tool in their, synthesizing into their kit.
Yeah.
It could be something we've talked about already, or it could be something that you haven't offered up yet.
Great question. I think there are three questions that are very important to ask ourselves. It's the question of satisfaction. So when we take a look at a specific area of our life, it could be health or wellness, career, business, relationship, spirituality, finances, whatever area of life we are looking to focus on. What we want to do is ask a first question of satisfaction. How satisfied am I with this area of my life on a scale of 0 to 10? Make a note of that. And then next question is, what are the potential for growth in this area of my life? And lastly, what are my contributions in this area of life? So in my relationship, how am I contributing to growing my relationships? My spirituality, how am I contributing to the growth of my spiritual journey? In my finance, how am I contributing to the growth of my finances or the general health of my finances? And when we think about these things, they can begin to help us, reflect on where we are today in this area of life. And maybe we can have thought starters on how we could move that area of life further. Just move the needle a little bit in that area of life. Here's my last sentence, which I like to say very often. If we focus on the ultimate goal and the vision, it can be completely overwhelming. What we want to do is focus on getting 1% better each day. 1% better each day. What do I need to do today to achieve 1% growth? It could be to read a book, listen to a podcast like this, or do something, go for a walk, write that song you've been hoping to write, or write that book, write a paragraph, read a paragraph. What do I need to do just to achieve 1% growth today?
And if everybody did that, at the end of a year, you would have 365% growth.
That's right.
And those are pretty good odds of a better world. Thank you so much, Babs, for your time, for your wisdom, for your friendship. And let's stay in touch.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time here.
Me too. Thanks.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Season 3 of the Lost Traveler Podcast with your host, Henry Cameron Allen. Visit me online at www.henryallen.org. Thank you to all my guests, and thank you to my listeners all around the world. I couldn't do this without your support. Let's keep striving for a better world together.